So here's something I don't have in very often. It's the TurboGrafx16. In the UK and Japan, these are the PC Engine, but in America, they are TurboGrafx. Now you can see this one has come with a flying lead, and this did have a SCART connector on the end that's come off. So basically the customer wants this replacing, but instead of replacing it like for like, we're going to remove the RF port on here and install a clean RGB. So let's just take a look how we're going to do that. So this is the customer's console. We have this existing cable just flying out the back. So it's not ideal. It's just coming out by the RF port. I've gone ahead and stripped this down and just tested that it does actually power on. So we know it's functional. And what we have if we look around is this, obviously not standard. Somebody has soldered these connectors on and flown this kind of ID ribbon cable out the side. So I'm going to presume these are picking up RGB, C-Sync, 5 volt and ground. They won't be the correct signal though, so they're just going to tap straight off the 6260 chip here. So this will generate RGB signals, but with a DC offset. So we need to correct that first. And then what the plan is I'm going to remove all this wiring, take off this RF port, and this is agreed with the customer, he's happy to do that. I'm going to solder in basically a Sega Saturn AV port right where this port was, so down on the PCB here. We'll fit a clean RGB mod, which is this universal board here, so we can correct the voltage levels and DC offset. And then finally the customer can have one of our custom clean RGB cables for the Sega Saturn. We shouldn't have to do any shell mods because if we look at the side, the port for the RF is big enough for the port for the Sega Saturn. So if we position it just right, this is going to sit out the side and work perfectly fine. So the first thing I'm going to do is just strip this wire off. We don't really care where these go because we're going to redo this mod. Now we can get rid of that nasty cable. And then I'm not sure whether there's schematics for this, but it's basically the same as the PC Engine GT, and I have started reverse engineering that, so I have the pin out for the 6260. And I recently shared this on Discord. I haven't actually posted it on the wiki yet, but we have the 6260 over here. The red, green and blue are pins 49, 47 and 51, and the sync is pin 44. So what we want to do is first find a place for the clean RGB mod that's going to sit nicely and not interfere with the shell. And we don't really want the wires too long. This would be a perfect spot here, but it's quite far away. These caps are getting in the way here. So maybe folding a few of the caps down, and I think placing it here with some double-sided foam is probably a good spot. And then we have the inputs. So these inputs want to go to the Hue chip, and the outputs will go to the port over here. So we can face it any which way. I think just upright's fine. We'll get some double-sided foam, stick it on the back over the top of the existing to give it a bit more thickness. And then we should be able to stick this down like so. And there's no weight in it, so that's not going to come off no matter what. And then before we wire this up, I'm just going to take off this RF port. So it should be simple enough. We normally have 3 pins on the back for most RF ports, like these 3 here. And then these 2 are holding the shield, and these 3 probably. So we just need to warm all these pads up and gently take this off. And that's the RF port off. And now we want to try and position our Sega Saturn connector on here. So we want to put that in the case and make sure the position aligns with this. And I think we'll just place it in by eye, make sure this can pass through the plastic if we're going to do this. So let's connect this up. So we can see with the cable in that it doesn't want to go through the plastic housing. So we might have to slightly remove this flat, to be honest, on this plastic, so that we can set the connector closer to the front. So it's just a small mod, which is just taking off that little bit of plastic either side. And from the outside, you won't see anything. But now if we place this on, we know we want to place this as close to the front as we can get. So it's these two circles here that we want to cover about there. So we're going to expose the copper here and the copper the other side. Just with the grinding tool. And this will allow us to anchor this port on the metal shield as well. And on the Saturn, the metal shield also needs to be ground. It is part of the cable, so it actually works out perfect for us. And then just grind away this other side. And if we have that right, now what we can do is solder one side on, and then we'll check for position and move it before we solder the other side. So that's just tacked into position now. And before we commit to the other side, let's just check what we're like. So I don't think that's bad at all. For first attempt, I'd say that is pretty level. In fact, I'd say that's perfect. So now we just need to solder in the other side to really anchor this down firmly. Otherwise, it's not really got much support. And then with that side soldered, I'm just going to reflow this side again to make sure it's well adhered. And then what we need to do now is wire basically the red, green and blue and sync inputs to this chip, then the ground and 5 volts to any ground and 5 volts, and then the red, green and blue output along with sync, audio, 5 volt and ground to this port. So a whole ton of wiring basically to hook this all up, and then we should have a nice port with RGB. So that's all the wiring done. We have the sound tapped off the 6280, so left and right stereo audio. Got the power and ground off the regulator, the RGB and sync in to the clean RGB, and then going out to the Sega Saturn port. So we have everything we need here. I've even tapped in composite so that we can use a composite cable here and see the difference. So now let's see if this works. So we'll go ahead and turn on here. And there we go. So that's now super clean RGB. So take a look at like the edges where colors change and the saturation of the color. And I'll show you the difference between this and the composite. So take note here where the whites are, how super sharp and crisp all this is. And now let's just swap that to composite. And this is the composite. So see how the colors are a lot duller. It might not pick up as well on camera. The edges here are really sketchy and slightly blurry. You've got a real wave here, so this is frame droop from the composite. You've got a lot of noise, so see under the please run, this flickering noise. So overall, the comparison between the RGB and the composite, this is why people like RGB. This is a CRT as well, so it masks a lot of the imperfections, whereas on HDMI converters, this will be even more noticeable. And that's the finish we've achieved in case. So almost looks factory. That's the original cutout with nothing done, and with the cable in, it literally almost looks like it was meant to be. So I'll get this one built back up now, tested and played, and then sent back to the customer.